It happened at 11:07 a.m., sharp. The hiss of a soda can opening cut through the silence like a blade. Danielle barely turned her head before the cold, sticky splash hit her square in the face. Coca-Cola, straight to the eyes, dripping down her blouse, soaking into the documents in her arms. Her body froze. The boardroom erupted in laughter. "Oops," smirked Chloe, the HR manager, still holding the half-empty can. "Guess I slipped." Another voice chimed in, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe next time don't wear white, sweetheart." Danielle stood trembling, eyes stung, jaw clenched. Not one person moved to help. Some turned away. Some pulled out their phones. Her skin, dark and dignified, felt like a target. Again. She reached for the napkins on the table. Chloe snatched them first. "Oh no," she said mockingly. "We wouldn't want to waste supplies." Danielle didn't cry. Not here. She simply whispered, "I'm still your director." Chloe rolled her eyes. Not for long. Then the glass doors swung open, and everything changed. A man in a tailored charcoal suit stepped in, calm, focused, eyes locked on Danielle. That man was her husband, and he owned the building, every single floor, every single name on every single contract, signed under his name, and he had seen everything. Danielle Carter had worked her way up from nothing. Born on the south side of Chicago, she knew how to stretch a dollar, dodge stray bullets, and read people faster than a lie could form. Her mother cleaned homes, her father drove city buses until arthritis took his hands. College was never a guarantee, it was a gamble. Danielle made it through on scholarships, night shifts, and coffee so bitter it burned holes in her stomach lining. She studied business, not because it was her passion, but because she believed it was her only ticket into rooms that didn't want her there. And it worked. At 35, she was the director of strategic operations at one of the fastest-growing tech logistics firms in Atlanta. But her title came with conditions, unspoken rules whispered behind glass walls. Don't be too loud. Don't be too ambitious. Definitely don't be both. She smiled more than she wanted to, bit her tongue more than she should have, and every time her ideas were presented by someone else, usually a white man with less experience, she kept a quiet record. Not for revenge, just to remind herself she wasn't imagining things. The promotion had come with promises, a better office, more say, a team of her own. But what she got was a corner glass room they called the fish tank, where everyone could see her and no one spoke to her unless they had to. Her team was hostile from day one. Eye rolls in meetings, backhanded compliments, emails left accidentally unreplied. She didn't tell her husband everything. She didn't want him to think she couldn't handle it. Because Danielle Carter could handle herself. She had to. She'd spent her whole life proving she was worth the seat she earned. But lately the seat didn't feel like it belonged to her. More like it had been loaned temporarily, with strings attached. She still came early. Still left last. Still dressed like every day was a meeting with the board. But today, the laughter, the humiliation, the soda dripping down her skin, it shattered something. Not her pride. That was still intact. But her patience? That had just run out. It hadn't started with the Coke. That was just the first time it got physical. Before that, it had been quieter, more insidious. Like the day Danielle sent out a department-wide strategy memo, outlining cost-saving solutions she'd spent 2 weeks building, only to hear her junior analyst, Scott, present the same content word for word in the monthly meeting. He didn't even change the bullet points. Just stripped her name off the deck and ran with it. She didn't interrupt. She waited. After the meeting, she approached him directly. "Nice deck, Scott. Next time, try using your own ideas." He blinked and gave a smug half laugh. "Oh, sorry, Danielle. I thought it was a collaborative doc." It wasn't. Then there was Chloe, head of HR, always smiling, always sharp, the kind of person who remembered birthdays but forgot boundaries. She'd once told Danielle, in front of the entire floor, "You know, for someone so well-spoken, you're surprisingly aggressive in emails." Danielle had stared at her for a full beat. "You mean direct?" Chloe had laughed like it was a compliment. Same thing. It wasn't. Little things chipped away at her daily. Office jokes that turned racial when they thought she wasn't listening. being left off calendar invites for key meetings, her request for software tools delayed due to budgeting constraints, while the marketing lead got an ergonomic chair flown in overnight. Even the cleaning crew acted differently around her, and when she brought it up, calmly, professionally, she was told she was reading into things. "You're very passionate," said Trent, her VP, "but sometimes passion can cloud perception. Try not to take things so personally." Personally, she'd survived entire rooms full of men who called her sweetheart instead of director. She led million-dollar operations without a single error on record. She had every right to take it personally, and she wasn't alone. One afternoon, she stayed late and caught Mia, a temp assistant who was always quiet, crying in the hallway. Mia had been denied full-time conversion, again, despite outperforming others in her role. "I'm not a fit," Mia said, sniffling. "That's what they told me. I don't have the look." Danielle didn't ask what they meant. She knew. Mia wore braids. Mia had an accent. Mia said yes, ma'am, with sincerity. That was the problem. At home, Danielle stayed composed. Her husband, Darius, was protective. More than that, he was powerful. A billionaire who built his empire quietly. Logistics, warehousing, transportation. Old money didn't respect him. New money feared him. He'd met Danielle at a fundraiser where she tore apart a speaker's fake diversity pledge in front of the entire room. He loved her fire, and she loved his silence. He never needed to raise his voice to own the room. But Danielle never brought her work problems to him. She wanted this position on her own merit, not because of who she married. Still, the days got heavier. Her proposals started getting lost in routing. Reports mysteriously edited after she submitted them. When she confronted IT, they said, "Could be a system bug," and closed the ticket. One Friday, she overheard her own team joking near the coffee bar. "She's like a diversity hire they forgot to fire," one of them said. Laughter followed. One voice added, "Bet she brings quinoa and tears to lunch." Danielle stood just around the corner, listening, every cell in her body tense. She didn't say a word, not then, but she wrote everything down. Names, dates, comments, threads. She started printing emails, saving Zoom calls, forwarding herself documents. Not because she was scared, because she was building something. Proof. And the irony? They still underestimated her, still saw her as the woman in heels and silence. Not the woman who had grown up translating eviction notices for her mother. Not the woman who knew how to keep records that couldn't be erased. Every day she walked in that building, she reminded herself why she stayed. Because if she left quietly, they'd win. And Danielle Carter had never left anything quietly. The office froze the moment he walked in. Darius Carter didn't belong in that space, not because of how he looked. Sharp black suit, silver tie, not a wrinkle out of place, but because of who he was. His name didn't live on company memos or the holiday email thread. It lived in silent equity documents on LLC filings that no one ever bothered to read. He stopped just inside the doorway, his eyes sweeping across the room, but landing squarely on Danielle. She was still standing, soda-stained, silent. He didn't rush to her, didn't cause a scene. Instead, he spoke with the ease of a man used to making people uncomfortable without raising his voice. "Chloe Whitmore," he said, looking at the HR director who still had the crushed can in her hand. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "I'm Darius Carter," he said. "I believe we've never met formally, though I've seen you speak on multiple occasions, including the last 7 minutes, recorded in full." He raised his wrist, tapped the side of his smartwatch. A barely audible click. The room tensed. Danielle didn't move, didn't speak. Her eyes were locked on her husband, but her hands remained at her sides. Chloe looked around. "I'm sorry, I don't understand what this is about. You can't just—" He cut her off. "I can. I own the majority shareholding in this company and the property it sits on. I've remained a silent partner until now. That silence ends today." Someone gasped. He turned to the rest of the team. "Before I say anything further, I want to be clear. I didn't come here to speak as Danielle's husband. I came to address an issue of operational integrity and workplace abuse. Something that, as of this morning, has legal documentation, witness testimony, and digital evidence backing every claim. Danielle finally stepped forward, calm, unflinching. She held up a folder, thick, labeled, time-stamped. 6 months of documentation, she said. Internal emails, meeting recordings, edited files, denied access logs, harassment complaints ignored. My original proposal decks. Even the fake reviews Chloe wrote under burner accounts. Chloe's face drained of color. That's ridiculous, she started, but Danielle kept going. Also footage from today, pulled directly from the boardroom camera, which, according to security protocols, backs up remotely to the server my husband owns. The screen behind them lit up, footage played, mute but undeniable. Chloe's hand, the soda, the laughter. Danielle's stillness. No editing, no context needed. Darius spoke again. Effective immediately, Chloe Whitmore's employment is terminated. So is Scott Bingham's, and the following individuals will be placed on administrative leave pending investigation. He read names, one by one. Calm, surgical. No one interrupted now, because suddenly this wasn't a joke. This was a reckoning. Danielle turned to face the team that had once mocked her. She didn't raise her voice, didn't gloat. I've spent my life working twice as hard to be taken half as seriously, she said. I stayed quiet, took notes, gave people the benefit of the doubt. But silence doesn't protect you. It just makes you easier to target. She glanced at Darius, then back at the team. You wanted me to break. Instead, I built a case. And just like that, the power in the room shifted. No screaming, no threats, just truth. And the people who'd laughed an hour ago, now they couldn't even look her in the eye. The entire executive floor had gathered, not by choice. The summons from Darius Carter came with no option to decline. The boardroom, usually sterile and dull, buzzed with a nervous energy. People glanced at each other, pretending not to sweat, pretending they hadn't whispered the very things now hanging over their heads like a noose. Danielle stood at the head of the table. Beside her, a projector screen displayed a title slide in bold professional font. Hostile Environment Report, Carter Logistics, Internal Review. She clicked to the next slide. I'll be speaking plainly today, she began, voice firm. This is not a diversity training. This is not a coaching session. This is an official review supported by third-party legal oversight and licensed compliance auditors. The air thickened. I'll begin with the timeline. Slide. Incident log. Month 1. She read aloud, clicking through screenshots of emails, time-stamped Slack messages, meeting records. February 2nd, strategy memo altered post-submission. Tracked edits show file was accessed under Scott Bingham's login credentials at 11:43 a.m. File was re-uploaded as his original work at 12:01 p.m. She clicked again. February 7th, team meeting. Danielle Carter asked 3 direct questions. None are answered. Bingham then reiterates her points 15 minutes later. Meeting minutes credit him for strategic insight. Danielle paused, looking at Scott directly. He shifted in his chair, pale. I spoke to the meeting scribe. She admitted you asked her to omit my contributions. I have that conversation recorded. Consent was provided in writing. Click. February 14th. Chloe Whitmore posts under the alias HR Hero 1984 on an anonymous review site referring to me as entitled, volatile, and undeserving of her position. We confirm the IP address originated from your work-issued laptop. IT backed that. Chloe's mouth opened, closed, her jaw clenched. Danielle didn't wait. February 20th, I requested upgraded planning software. Denied due to budget limitations. On the same day, Trent approved a $2,800 Herman Miller chair for our head of design. It was categorized as an ergonomic emergency. Darius interjected calmly, standing now. That expense, along with 12 others, has been flagged. Our external auditor will reach out to each approving manager. Click. March 2nd. Internal Slack message captured by Mia Brown, whom you all called the temp, reads, let's see how long the DEI token lasts. Betting 2 months. Danielle turned to the table. You thought she was invisible. She was documenting everything. Mia entered the room at that moment, flanked by a representative from legal counsel. Her presence, once ghost-like, now radiated strength. Chloe stood. "This is slander. We were venting. It wasn't—" Danielle didn't flinch. "You poured soda on me. That's not venting. That's assault." Click. Here's the footage. March 12th, 3:11 p.m. You approach with a drink. You open it. You wait until I turn. You throw it. The video played silently on the screen behind them. Chloe's eyes widened as her own smirk played back at her, frozen now in front of everyone. A perfect portrait of cruelty. Darius stepped forward. "I've remained silent because I believed people could learn. But what I've seen in this report, and what I witnessed today, shows deliberate patterns of discrimination, abuse of authority, and systemic failure in leadership." He walked the length of the table, calm, confident. This company was built on logistics, systems, efficiency. But what is efficiency if it ignores the human behind the machine? He stopped beside Trent, the VP. "You signed off on false expense reports, denied access without cause. You knew about the harassment and did nothing." Trent's face flushed. "I was following HR protocol." "No, you were protecting your friends," Danielle said, "and that stops today." She dropped a folder on the table, thick with paper, signatures, timestamps. "I've submitted everything to the board. As of this morning, I've also filed a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Independent counsel has been engaged," Darius added. "Effective immediately, Chloe Whitmore and Scott Bingham are terminated for cause. Trent's position will be suspended pending review. Every person mentioned in the report will be required to complete federal workplace compliance training, monitored externally, and reviewed quarterly. Promotions and bonuses for this quarter are frozen." Silence. Danielle looked around the room. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You tried to humiliate me in front of everyone," she said. "Now I'm giving you something worse. Accountability." A long pause. Then she leaned forward slightly, eyes focused, calm but unshakable. "You built a culture that rewarded silence and punished integrity. You thought your power would protect you." She tapped the final slide. "But you forgot, real power doesn't scream. It watches, it waits, then it acts." Nobody moved, nobody spoke, because justice hadn't come with fists. It came with facts, with names, with dates, with truth that couldn't be spun or buried. Danielle turned, walking out with Darius and Mia behind her. The doors closed softly, but the sound was louder than any slam. 3 weeks later, Danielle stood in the same boardroom. But everything had changed. The long table wasn't packed with suits anymore. Instead, it was surrounded by a dozen young interns from underrepresented communities, many of them nervous, wide-eyed, scribbling in fresh notebooks. Danielle smiled, her posture relaxed but commanding. She belonged here. This was her space now. On the screen behind her, a new slide read, "The Carter Initiative, Redesigning Equity in the Workplace." Her voice was warm as she spoke. "This program isn't just about giving people a seat at the table. It's about changing the shape of the table entirely." She told them about the new mentorship model, how the initiative would pair rising professionals with executive sponsors, how the hiring pipeline would no longer filter out people based on zip code, school name, or accents that didn't sound corporate enough. She spoke honestly, not as a figurehead, but as someone who had lived the silence, the small humiliations, the slow erasure. Mia, now full-time and promoted, handled the presentation tech. Darius watched from the side of the room, not as the billionaire CEO, but as a proud husband, silent, supportive, present. Later that afternoon, Danielle walked out to the garden space behind the building, a quiet place where she used to eat lunch alone. She sat on the same bench where she had once cried quietly, soda-soaked and humiliated. But now, she closed her eyes and felt the breeze, heard laughter from the interns down the path, felt the weight that used to live in her chest now replaced with something steadier. Purpose. Her phone buzzed. A message from one of the interns. "Thank you. Today made me believe I might actually belong in this industry." Danielle smiled. She had won. Not just the battle, but something bigger. Legacy. She pulled a small card from her bag and placed it on the bench beside her. It was the same quote she had scribbled into her planner months ago, back when she still questioned whether she'd survive that place. When they try to shrink you, grow roots instead. She whispered it aloud, steady, then stood up, taller than ever, and walked forward. A year later, Carter Logistics looked nothing like the company it used to be. The change wasn't flashy. There were no grand PR campaigns or hollow slogans. The transformation happened in hiring rooms, policy rewrites, mentorship check-ins, and anonymous feedback forms that finally meant something. Danielle had been promoted to Chief Strategy Officer, not as a gesture, as a necessity. She had proven she saw the future of business more clearly than anyone else in the room. She rebuilt entire systems, re-engineered workflows that had always favored loud mediocrity over quiet brilliance. Across the industry, the Carter Initiative became a national case study in corporate reform. Universities reached out. HR departments requested Danielle to speak. A Harvard Business Review article titled, "Justice as Strategy: How One Executive Redefined Equity Without Apology," made her a household name in corporate circles. And those who tried to erase her? Scott Bingham disappeared from LinkedIn. Rumor had it he'd applied for roles at 3 rival firms. None hired him. His name triggered search results now tied to harassment complaints and falsified reports. Chloe Whitmore resurfaced as a consultant, briefly, but a background check by a client unearthed her termination for cause. She moved cities, started over. But the incident followed her, not because of vengeance, but because truth has a way of leaving footprints. Trent, once the smooth-talking VP, took a job in a small logistics startup in Ohio. He kept a lower profile now. Word was he no longer mentored women. As for Mia, she now led Watchtower, a confidential ethics arm Danielle founded. Employees came to her directly. No more anonymous boxes or unseen complaints. Mia had gone from temp to change agent, and she never sat silently again. Every morning, Danielle still arrived early. She still took her coffee the same way, still passed that same garden bench on her way inside. But now it wasn't a place of silence. It was a symbol. Sometimes she'd see a junior analyst sitting there, or an intern pacing nearby, rehearsing a presentation aloud. She never interrupted. She just nodded. They always nodded back. They knew who she was. They knew what she was. Not a token, not a survivor, a builder, a disruptor, a woman who rewrote the system, not for revenge, but for redemption. One afternoon during a panel in DC, a moderator asked her, "How do you measure success now, Danielle?" She paused, then smiled. "Success isn't about the title. It's when someone who looks like me walks into a room and doesn't feel like they have to prove they belong there." The room fell quiet, not because of shock, but because everyone knew it was true. She didn't need applause. She had legacy.